Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. My name is Emma, I am a college student and I'm a member of the Young Adults group here in Trinity. And just like you, I grew up in Ruach in youth club, so it's really cool to be coming back to speak to you guys again. So I really hope you're doing well this time of year. I know it can be quite stressful in May with exams and stuff. So one thing I'd really recommend, and you can do this if you like, is to give your exam timetable to an older member of the church, to your youth leaders. You can message me if you like, and ask them to pray over your exams as they happen. One friend was doing this for me during my college exams this year, and yeah, I just felt a real sense of peace going into my exams, of God's presence with me. So I think after a year that's been in it, after quite a stressful term, I think yeah, you'd really benefit from it. And if you'd like to message me to pray over your exams, whether you're sitting your first set of secondary school exams or you're sitting your leaving cert, don't hesitate to get in touch. So this morning I'm very excited to be continuing our series on the mind. So this morning we're going to be looking at the topic of who do we think Jesus is? What is our perception of God? And who do we say that he is? So this is really crucial, I think, because it determines our relationship with God, determines how we view ourselves, how we think God perceives us, and also how we relate to other people as well. So grab your Bible, grab a coffee, and let's get stuck in. So I wonder if you asked one of your friends, what do you think God is like? And you asked them to draw a picture for you. Would it resemble some kind of Gandalf-like figure from the Lord of the Rings, you know, a beard down to his toes, sitting on a big, imposing throne in the sky, a kind of stern, distant, difficult to please, angry father figure? And I think a lot of people have this idea of God in their heads, and I think it comes from, you know, stereotypical depictions of God in art and in film. So I really love depictions of God and Jesus in books and in movies that kind of challenge this Gandalf-like figure and that give us new and unique and creative insights into his nature. So I don't know if you've read or seen the movies of the Narnia series, but it's widely understood that Aslan represents Jesus in those series, and spoiler alert, he sacrificially gives up his life for one of the main characters, but at one point in the movie, one of the main characters, Lucy, asks one of the talking beavers, as you do, oh, Aslan is a lion, like, is he safe? And the beaver says, no one said anything about being safe, but he is good, and he is the king. So we get this image of, you know, Aslan, the lion, being powerful, being the conqueror of evil, but also being really gentle and kind and intimate with Lucy and Susan, and yeah, sacrificially giving his life out of a place of abundant love. So another image that I really like is from the movie The Shack, and it's a book as well. Some of you older teens may have read it. And in it, God is depicted as this African-American woman, a real motherly figure who is constantly cooking and preparing meals for the main character, the people that she loves. And the main character is really confused by this, and he asks God, why are you appearing to me like this? And he or she says, I want to stop you from falling back into your religious conditioning. You know, your idea of me as stern and distant and Gandalf is completely false. So today we're going to be exploring this question of who we think God and Jesus really are, what our image of them is like, and we're going to be reading Matthew 16 verses 13 to 17. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." So just for context, this passage is smack dab in the middle of Matthew's Gospel. Jesus has been ministering for a while now. He's been performing miracles, he's delivered his famous Sermon on the Mount, and the disciples have been with him every step of the way. So he comes to this region outside of Galilee where he's usually teaching, and he asks the disciples to report back the general reaction of the people. You know, who do they think that I am? Do they think I'm some kind of, you know, crazy teacher? And he probably knew the answer himself, but I'd say he just wanted to know what the disciples thought. And so the disciples say, well, the people think you're one of those old guys, you know, one of the ancient Jewish prophets who spoke out fearlessly against rebellious and wicked kings like Elijah and Jeremiah. They think you're one of those guys who've come, you know, back from the dead to maybe overthrow the Romans or something. And we know that this is an inaccurate and one-dimensional picture of who Jesus really is and his purposes for being on earth. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience of, you know, one of your friends comes up to you and goes, well, you know, so-and-so over there, Billy, thinks like you're really stuck up, or thinks that like you're really smart or something. And you're like, oh, no, like that's not me at all. That's not my true nature. That's not who I am. And you turn to your friend for confirmation and you say, am I like that? Am I stuck up? And hopefully they say no, because they know you, you have a relationship with them, they know who you really are. And this is exactly what Jesus does. He turns to his disciples, the people that he's been ministering alongside for years, and he asks them, well, who do you say I am? And Peter replies on behalf of all the disciples and says, well, you're the Messiah, you're the Son of the living God, you're not just God's mouthpiece, you're not just a prophet or a miracle worker or even just a good teacher. Like, you are the Christ, you are the Messiah. So I think maybe sometimes like the people the disciples were talking about, we can have this one-dimensional image of God and of Jesus if we're not living in daily relationship with him. And I think two common ideas that people have of God, and certainly this is an idea that I fell into often when I was a teenager, was that firstly, God is distant, and secondly, that he is angry. And if he wasn't angry, he was perpetually disappointed with me because I was never good enough. And as you know yourself, like, it's very difficult to be in a relationship with someone who you think is perpetually angry with you. You know, you have to walk on eggshells around them, you have to be careful with what you say, with what you do, you can't be completely honest with them. And we know that those ideas are completely false and that God is desperate for a relationship with us. And we'll look at a few verses later that talk about that. But where do we get this perception that God is distant and that God is angry? And I think it's kind of based on two main ideas that are wrong. And the first one is that somehow who he is and his goodness is somehow contingent and tied up with our own circumstances and feelings. So you know that if I'm doing really well in school, if I'm in a relationship, if I have loads of friends, somehow God really loves me that day. But the next day, if I'm feeling lonely and isolated, if I'm failing in school, then God must be really angry with me. I've done something to upset him. And that idea is completely false theology. It's not what the Bible says. And then the second, I think, false idea we can fall into is this kind of religious mindset of thinking that we need to earn God's love and grace. And you know, I think we've all done this. You go through your whole weekday without really praying or maybe reading the Bible as much as you'd like to, and you get to Sunday and you think, right, I'm going to be really good today, God. I'm going to read your word, I'm going to pray, I'm going to go to church, and then you'll really love me. And he does love us when we do those things, because ultimately they bring us closer to relationship with him, to understanding what he's like, and knowing his mission and his kingdom for our own lives. But he also loves us when we don't do those things. And it says in Ephesians chapter 2 verse 8 that it is by grace that you have been saved through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. You cannot earn your way into God's favour. And I think a really beautiful parable that displays this is the parable of the prodigal son. And I really think this parable should be renamed actually to the parable of the loving father and the two lost sons, because I think both sons, you can read about this in Luke chapter 15, were kind of lost in their own way. But both of them had kind of a limited and narrow perspective of their father's love. on the one hand, not only did the younger son, who, you know, had wasted generations of his family's savings partying and doing all these mad things, not only did he think that when he came home his father would be angry and that he'd, you know, sentence him to a lifetime as a servant, but also the older son, who stayed with his father and who never disobeyed him, who worked for him, kept all his commands. He thought that somehow he could earn his way to his father's love and his father's inheritance, and he is completely taken aback when the younger son comes home and the father celebrates him and somehow is celebrating him after his disobedience. And he asks his father why this is, and he says, "You are always with me and everything I have is yours." And it's in that moment that we realise that there's nothing that the older son can do to earn his father's love. And for both sons, I think the idea of their father is turned on its head. They are blown away by and we are blown away by the radical, amazing inclusivity and limitlessness of the father's love. And I think once we recognise who God really is, who Jesus really is, then he reveals to us who we really are. And if you read on from that passage we were looking at earlier in Matthew 16, you'll see that after Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah, Jesus turns to Peter and gives him a new name, gives him this new name of Cephas, which means rock, and says, "Peter, you will be the foundation on which the church is built." So once we recognise who Jesus really is, then he reveals to us who we really are as children and image bearers of his light. So just to sum up then, this morning Jesus is asking you, who do you say that I really am? And on a Sunday morning it might be really easy to say that, well, Lord, I know that you're loving and kind and gracious and faithful and true, but I think sometimes we struggle in the gap between knowing the answer and living out the answer of this really important question. Sure, we see with Peter 10 chapters after he's declared Jesus as the Messiah, he completely denies that he ever even knew Jesus before his crucifixion. So I think that this question of who Jesus really is not just a Sunday morning question, but an everyday question. And so I'd like to set you a challenge related to that this month. I'd like you to pick one of the Gospels, be it Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and maybe commit to reading like 10-ish verses a day. Maybe you could do it with a friend, because we're not meant to do this whole faith thing alone. So commit to reading it with a friend, and I'd like you to just keep a notebook and pick out the characteristics of Jesus and of God that are revealed to you through the words of the scriptures. So as the ones I mentioned there, kind, loving, gracious, true, and pray beforehand as well for God to reveal more about himself to you, because there's always more to the Lord that we can even comprehend or imagine, and every time we try put him in a box he breaks out of it. So yeah, I'd love you to share what God has been revealing to you through this next month to me, and I really hope that you have a lovely week, and yeah, the Lord bless you and keep you, and all the best.